Welcome to this week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast, where experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based in Kingston upon Thames are invited on to share their story with us. I'm your host, Amyr Rocha-Lima.
This week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast is brought to you by Holland Hahn Wills, a financial planning and wealth management firm based in Kingston upon Thames. Holland Hahn Wills specialises in retirement planning for senior professionals and successful business owners. Visit hhw-uk.com to start feeling more relaxed and confident about your financial future.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. I'm joined today by Annie Armitage. Annie is a photographer providing family, personal brand, and headshot photography. What's unique about Annie is how she adapted her business during the COVID pandemic, adopting technology to enable her to offer a virtual photo shoot service, which is now becoming a new business line in and of itself. And be sure to listen to the end, where Annie shares some tips with us on how to present yourself in the best possible way on video calls. So whether you're interested in knowing more about the world of photography, or would like to know more about what it takes to run a successful independent business, then I hope you enjoy this episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. Welcome, Annie Armitage, to the Inside Kingston Podcast. Annie, I'm really excited about this conversation because, well, I've always been fascinated with photography and the power of telling stories through images. And actually, like many of our listeners, I've become an amateur photographer just by virtue of having a phone with a camera in my pocket and having small children and just taking infinite number of pictures with them and of them. But for me, it's great to get a chance to speak with you, a professional photographer, and I'm sure our listeners can learn a lot from your expertise in this area too. But to kick off this conversation, I'd like to go back in time, if that's okay. So Annie, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Sutton Coldfield in the West Midlands. And so I was born in 1964 and I stayed there until I was 28 when I moved down to Kingston upon Thames in 1993.
Oh, awesome. And you've been here ever since?
I've been here ever since, and hopefully I'm not moving.
Very cool.
I never say never about going back to Birmingham, but I'm very happy where I am at the moment.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Annie, did you go to university? And if so, what did you study?
I actually attended Manchester Polytechnic, but for 8 weeks. I left to get married to my ex-husband. That's another story. But more recently, I've attended the London College of Communication, part of the University of Arts, to study an ABC diploma in professional practice of photography. And I did that in 2006 and came out 2007.
Oh, wow. Awesome. And could you tell us a little bit about your career journey before you set up your business?
So I used to be a dressmaker when I was younger. So I used to make wedding dresses, and so I've always been a creative. I then actually went on to do an H&D in hotel and catering management, and after that I worked for Oddbins for a while. I met my present husband. That sounds sounds if there's a series of them. There isn't. There's just my second one, and I moved down with him in 1992, and I did just a course in to be a PA, and I was worked for Compact Computer Limited for a number of years in Richmond, and then I went on to maternity leave. So during maternity leave, as you most rightly said about taking pictures of your children, that's how I started my journey to become a photographer, because I had a film camera then, and I was just taking pictures of my son, who was born in 2000, and my friends were saying what lovely pictures they were, so I was taking pictures of their children, and that led me to do it at City and Guilds at what was the Kingston Academy. It was the North Kingston Centre for Further Education, and then I went back to university in 2006. So that was my journey. In 2007, I set up my business. Yeah.
And isn't it great, similar to other guests we've had on the show, how just different people find their path in different ways as to finding what they love to do and then getting the education they feel they need and then setting up a business and rocking it. I love hearing that part of people's stories. So that sounds really awesome, Annie. So bringing this conversation to the present, could you tell us a little bit about your business today?
Okay, so I call myself a photographer, obviously, but people may know me predominantly from my marketing for many years as a family photographer. So I'm on location and I do family lifestyle. So I go into people's homes, I meet them in local parks and creating imagery that can be passed down from generation to generation. So that includes fine art albums, fine art paper albums, as well as, bespoke framing. So it's all about the quality of what I can do for people that has longevity. The other side of my business, which is building more and more, which I've done all this time as sitting nicely along the families during the week, is my corporate work. So I go into businesses and create imagery. I the headshots for the business, but I'm working more and more with single entrepreneurs, creating a bank of well-crafted images for them for social media and for website use. So it's not just relying on stock. I mean, if people are really hungry for imagery, instead of resorting to an image that everybody else is using, within one of my branding shoots, I can actually create a whole bank of imagery that they can just pick out. So that's more what I'm doing more and more. And I also have a nursery photography business. I'm quite busy, called Little Planet Photos. So I have a number of local businesses that I work with. So it's Oranges and Lemons. I work with Katie's House, creating imagery for the parents to buy online of their little.
That sounds very entrepreneurial, Annie, and I'm excited to sort of pull some of those threads with you throughout this conversation. But before I do so, I just want to take us back to something I said at the top of the show, because I really am fascinated with storytelling as a whole, but in particular, how one can tell stories through photography. And as you alluded to there in this last bit of our conversation, being able to then tell those stories to future generations. When I look at pictures of my great-grandparents, and I get to hear the story around that picture, or who they were, just absolutely fascinates me. And to a certain extent, if we pay attention, we're doing that for our grandkids and even generations ahead of them. So I'd just like to pick your brains, really. Could you give us an insight into your mindset when you're trying to look for the story in the photo you're taking?
I think the family at home shoots that I do, there is more of a story. I think the portraits in the park shoots that I do with the families, they are more of a record of beautiful portraits of the children and also the family just being together, because usually it's either the mother or the father taking the pictures and getting them all together. So you've got that not only for the grannies, but for posterity. The family at home shoots, it's all about what the children are up to, what's their favorite toy, what do they go to bed with, what do they cuddle, just fooling around, on the sofa, for instance, being tickled by daddy. Those are the things that I like to capture, or them baking together and flour going everywhere, or let's get the hose out, or just the family being together, because it changes, from, children who are 3 or 4, when they're 14 and 15, they're not going to be doing the same thing. So it is capturing that moment in time. And we take those moments for granted because we think they're going to last forever. I think the first 5 years of my son's life was eternal. But then all of a sudden he goes to school and it's gone. He's 21 this month. So I know from experience that time in a family, you only have them small for not very long. They are only small, just for a handful of years.
They are, absolutely. I'm starting to witness that with my kids, and you're absolutely right. And capturing those images are something that I'm sure my wife and I will cherish for many, many, many years to come. So that's really good. Annie, you very kindly sort of explained to us the different businesses you have and how you operate with those different businesses. But how has operating those businesses been affected by the COVID pandemic and lockdown?
Well, if I start with the nurseries, there's only one nursery that could allow me in last year in November. They were quite comfortable with the fact that I had COVID and they were COVID safe. All the others have said no. I think they just wanted no risk at all. So my nursery business, so I've had to find ways actually to compensate for that. When I was able to get going June and July, obviously my family's kind of even when my families came back in June and July. That was great. That carried me through. And then I had to go into isolation for a couple of weeks. So it's been up and down. This last lockdown, I've taken, well, not that I didn't take the others seriously, but my husband being a little bit older, I decided I didn't want the transmissible variant in our home, even though I'd had COVID. I didn't want to take the risk, so I've been at home. So I've actually been doing virtual photo shoots for people, and this has been a very exciting time for me because I've been taking control of people's mobile devices in order to take pictures of themselves and create imagery that is probably just almost as good as if I was there in person. So that's been very helpful actually in not being able to see people.
And I definitely want to talk to you a little bit more about this, Annie, because we connected originally, perhaps through the Kingston Chambers, but more recently, again, through LinkedIn. And it was precisely because of a post around this virtual photo shoot service that you offer. And I was, number one, as you mentioned it, I was just taken aback by the quality of the headshots and the imagery that you are, as a photographer, able to get from somebody's phone remotely. And I just wanted you to expand on that a bit, because as you mentioned there at the top of the show, yes, we can populate our websites, our individual business social media with stock images, but having good photos and images of ourselves as business owners or of our team it's priceless, because that's what gets the potential client to get a feel for who the company are, who the people are. So could you just tell us a little bit more about how this actually works? How is it that you take control of somebody's phone and then produce those pretty stunning images?
I think it's all about preparation. Because I'm not actually there in person, I'm scouting. When I go to someone's home or workplace, I am scouting where the light is, because I'm predominantly, as I said, I can use an extra light if I need to, but generally I use available light. Most people now have these ring lights, which are great. So if they've got one of those big newer rings, which they can put the phone in the middle, I advise them to get that, because it's all about the light. And if they don't have that, there's not a problem. I can just ask them to do little videos of the different areas, the 3 different areas in their home or workplace. So I can actually get a sense of where the light is. I also need to know north, south, east, west. I need to know where the light comes around the day, so it's not too sunny, if it's going to be a bright day. And we have a Zoom call to discuss. I send them a what to expect guide as far as the virtual shoots, and then we just have a quick call just a few minutes before, just say, are you ready? And then we go. And I actually they give me a code from an app they download. I put it into my laptop on a website portal, and then I'm able to actually take pictures of them with my trackpad by clicking on it. So it's very exciting. But it's all about, so they can hear me, but they can't see me. So they don't do it so they're taking a selfie of themselves. It's the camera's the other way around. Yeah. And it's the one I did in Portugal last week, which was fabulous. The husband was holding the camera, and actually I find if someone else is holding the phone, it is better, because I can actually say, can you just move this way a little bit, move to the right, move to the left, move up, move down, and then I can direct the person as well. It's not ideal to have it on a stand, the phone. It just means I've got to ask them to move a lot more. And as I'm asking them to do different poses or laugh or look away, it's not interrupted by me saying, oh, can you just move the tripod a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I treat the shoot as if I would do if I was there. And it's all about making someone feel as comfortable as possible. And I think actually in all my reviews I've had on Google and LinkedIn, people, that's the first thing they say, Annie made me feel, really at ease. And that's the only way I'm going to get someone to be themselves.
Yeah.
And it's fast. And so I then actually treated the download images as if, there are smaller res. No, they're still high res, but they're smaller images.
Yeah.
So they're not going to be big. Well, they could be big enough to blow onto a billboard, but generally they're fine for print up to about 9x6 inches, and they're fine for social media. Perfectly all right. Yeah. And I will treat them as if I've a normal picture.
Yeah, I find it amazing that we're now at a place where, given that you are obviously part of professional study groups within your field and everything else, Annie, if us as business owners in our own fields, if we keep our ears to the ground, it's incredible how different business owners in completely different fields have been able to pivot and adapt during this lockdown. So effectively, technology enables your expertise to be transmitted to people who maybe don't know how to take a professional photo at all, and they get awesome results out of it. And I just find that, for me, that fills me with optimism, even though we're still in this period of lockdown here in the UK. It just shows the amount of breakthrough technology we probably will be seeing going forward, even when I hear about examples like that. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I just, as a bit of a nerd, I find that really, really cool.
But it's exciting that at my there's a woman I know, she's a business coach who I did the shoot with last week. She actually says selfies won't be the same again. With her, she realizes that what can be done, but she can't manage it to create what I did with the same device. And that shows the difference between being a photographer. Also, I don't see this as just something for lockdown. I've now created a business called the Virtual Photo Shoot Company, and I'm setting up the website and all the social media, because I'm getting a job in Malaysia. I'm getting a job over in Nova Scotia, purely because they like my style, they like the way I work. And it's not because of restrictions. Otherwise, they'd have to pay me thousands to go over there. So it's actually opening up a completely new channel that I never knew I thought would exist.
Yeah, hats off to you, Annie. I think that's so cool. I really do. Now, I understand that you recently wrote a blog on sharing some tips about how people can present themselves in the best possible way through video calls. And I think this is super, super pertinent. And I think our listeners can get a lot out of this, Annie, especially given the fact that pretty much all of us in a service-based or a professional capacity have seen our clients, I think, exclusively virtually for the last 12 months. Could you share some of those tips with our listeners today?
Yes, I think the first thing that I ask people to do is actually do a screenshot of themselves, because sometimes we become immune to what we look like, and actually seeing it differently in a picture, we can then actually start to analyze, okay, what's behind me? Is it looking tidy? Is it looking messy? I mean, in my background, I've got, pictures on the wall and, flowers, and but it's part of my persona. And it's actually, my background is part of my brand almost. So that's actually thinking, is my background a distraction? For instance, I'm looking at your background. You've got guitar, so I can actually see that's part of your hobby, your personality. And instead of just having, just one of those virtual backdrops, it's really nice to create something which is showing more of you. But to analyze it, are there just stacks of papers behind you? Is it looking really cluttered? Are you coming across as being someone who's a disorganized person? So I think background is key. Also, it's talking about light. I know you're very well lit on your face. I always recommend these little rings. So the light rings that you can have to illuminate, you can just attach them to your desk actually, and have them attached, plugged into your laptop as the source of light, source of energy. But I really find that light is most important. You often go into calls and you see that people are dark, their faces are dark, you can't really see them. So that's one thing actually, is to look at the light on your face. Obviously don't shine it directly into your face, because you will find that you will get a headache after a while. So I usually bounce it into a reflector, which is falling down as I speak.
Absolutely.
So that's light is very important, and also how you dress. I dress as if I'm going for a meeting. Yeah. You haven't seen the bottom half of me. I'm wearing my jogging tracksuit bottoms and my big furry slippers, but at least the top half of me, I've got my makeup on. I'm ready for business, and I think that it's not a case of just turning up and turning the video off. You have to be seen. You have to be seen as if you're ready for business.
Yeah, I think that's invaluable, those tips, Annie, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I appreciate your feedback on my image and background. It was serendipity for me. When lockdown came in, within that first week, I had an annual review meeting with a client who had just recently retired. There was a lot of number crunching, a lot of things that were going to happen in that meeting, especially given what was happening to financial markets and everything else at the time. And believe it or not, I've been working with him for 5 years. And believe it or not, he turned around to me and he said, one of the first things he said, he wasn't panicking about the stock market, about anything. He said, I didn't know you played the guitar. Mm-hmm. And that immediately just stopped me in my tracks. And I went, gosh, I work with people who I know them intimately. I know their numbers. I know about their family, their goals, their aspirations. And not all of them, but some of them might not know that I like playing the guitar. And I thought the background is definitely an underrated opportunity to be able to show a little bit of my human side to my clients, just like they show their human side to me. So I'm with you on that. For me, it was serendipity. But for our listeners who are listening to this now, by now, I'm sure most people have caught up with lighting and background and just using that to your advantage. Annie's tips are invaluable on that front. So thank you for that, Annie. Annie, what are some of the key business lessons that you've learned throughout your life?
Well, I started my business when I was 42, when I came out of college. And even though it was training a photographer to be in business, that there wasn't much business. So I've had to learn that from scratch. And it's what I've learned with my creativity. That's one thing. But it can take over. I've had to learn to be a business person first and a photographer second. I started networking with the Athena Group, actually, back in 2009. And I must say that that's been the backbone to my business, networking. It's people underestimate it. They expect that, people who don't understand how networking works, they expect to kind of pick up, a contact, a potential client at any meeting they go to. It's a slow burn. I'm still getting work from one contact I met in 2008. I don't know whether can I quickly give the analogy on that. This is a woman who just needed a simple headshot. I charged £50 then just for one headshot. And she loved it so much, she then had a family shoot. She then organised Q Fate. And she said, Annie, do you want to have a stall at our fete? So, yes, please, I'd love to do that. And so in 2010, I had my first stall, and I've had one subsequently every year since, except obviously last year. And we, the work that's generated from that one contact is about £30,000 to £40,000 worth of work.
Wow. Just shows you, doesn't it? Small steps compound.
Absolutely. So for me, I think in my business journey, in networking and actually building all these connections who've got as you say, there's so many amazing businesses out there. And I've actually brought their businesses into my business using their expertise. And I wouldn't have known, I wouldn't have been able to go online and actually Google them, but actually meeting them personally, it's who you know, like, and trust. And it's been incredible for me as a business to get to know them too.
Fantastic. When you look back at your career journey to date, what are you most proud of?
I think actually just going for it, just actually, but I look back and I didn't actually tell my husband I was going to go on the course. I was just okay, I'm going to do this, get on with it. And I did it. I'm going to set up a business. I'm going to go for it and do it. I think being a little bit older now, I'm late 50s. I don't know whether I'll be as brave, but I think looking at the way that my business, the times I've made very courageous decisions, yes, I'm most proud of that and how I've created something and stood by my guns. I haven't gone down the cheap option. I know what I'm worth. I know that my photography and the service that I give is second to none. And so being brave and my service is what I'm most proud of in my business.
That's really cool. And what next for you and your business? Are there any plans in the pipeline that you can share with us?
I think that the virtual shoot company is very exciting. I'm just talking to a website designer this week. I'm going to have an initial website which is off my website, so it looks like a completely different website, but it is part of the Annie Armitage, just to test a little bit more before I invest in having a whole new website. So that's very exciting. I'm working on that this week. Looking forward to going back to just seeing people again. Being a people person, I've really missed. Zoom is not quite the same to me. But no, I'm very excited for the future. I've got, 20 or 30 booked family sessions already. I'm looking forward to working with corporates within a couple of weeks. And I'm just looking forward to seeing people and getting back to a little bit more normality than it has been.
Absolutely. Exciting times ahead.
Yes, absolutely.
Very good. As we start to wrap up, I'd like to ask you a few quick fire questions that our listeners are always interested in. So, Annie, what do you do to relax outside of the office?
Well, one of the good things about lockdown last year was that I started the Couch to 5K. And so I regularly do a 5K run in Richmond Park. Actually, I run. It's more like a gentle jog. I say run. It sounds very impressive. I also, I regularly now do yoga twice a week online with Vicky B. And she was a yoga teacher in Surbiton, but she's now moved to Dorset. So the way other businesses pivoted. So I do my yoga. I've got my 2 dogs, Reggie and Rosie. So I take them out for lovely long walks. And I like to play the piano and I sing.
Oh, that's very cool. And are there any books that you've recently read that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Yes, well, I'm actually also dieting. That's another of my hobbies, I think. There's a fascinating book called The Obesity Code by Jason Fung. And it really talks about the reasons why people do get so big. And it's not all about they're just eating the wrong things. It's to do with our hormones and how we're having too much in the way of carbohydrates that are building up our insulin resistance. So I've been finding that a fascinating book and taking it forward, certainly looking at the way that my diet is, going forward for the rest of my life. So that's been a great book to read. Sounds really interesting.
And are there any movies or TV shows that you recently watched that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Well, I'm a big Scandi noir fan. So I love anything dark and Swedish and, or Norwegian or from Copenhagen. So no, I'm in. So it was The Investigation that was on recently. I think it was Channel 4, but you can actually view it on iPlayer, and it's about the woman who went missing on a submarine and was found dead. But it's a very, very good story. It's so I'd really recommend that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I find that genre, the Scandis, they know how to tell a story within that genre in a really, really interesting way, don't they?
And the lighting of it.
Oh, the imagery, beautiful.
Perfect.
Yeah.
It's got this kind of dusky, darky blue colour or green, and it's marvellous. And the acting is superb. No, I'm a big fan of Scandi noir.
Very cool. I'll definitely check that one out. And finally, where can people go to find out more about you and your business?
So my main website is www.anniearmitage.com. And so that's where my main site is, and everything to do. You can just on the front page. Actually, you can go to the different areas, whether it's family, corporate, nurseries, and they'll direct you to the specific websites or areas in the website where you need advice or need to find information about me.
And for the benefit of our listeners, I'll make sure that I add that link to the show notes. Annie, thank you for joining us here on the Inside Kingston podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know your story.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's been a delight. Thank you.
That wraps up another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Make sure to check out our guests' website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions or know someone who should be a guest on the show, please feel free to get in touch. I would also love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and a 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on some great guests, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rate well on iTunes so that others can find and enjoy the show too. Thanks for listening.